Hey everyone, welcome to Story Mantra, the YouTube channel I started because this is the mantra I have been living by for 20 years. Storytelling at its best. And super excited today we have on board the #1 agency from the West Coast, Sandra Dijkstra Literary Agency. We have Elise Capron, who has been with the agency for 17 years. And not only does that agency represent stellar authors like Amy Tan, Lisa C., Maxine Hong Kingston, Eric Faulkner, and many more, they have guided the careers of many best-selling fiction and nonfiction authors. And I first learned about this agency when I saw Amy Tan's book on a bookshelf in Hong Kong, and I was like, I want to be like her. On the fiction side, Elise is interested in character-driven literary fiction for the adult market. She aims to work with writers who are getting their work published regularly in magazines and who also have a realistic sense of the market and their audience. So writers, do your homework. At the bottom of the video, you will also see links to the agency and to the kind of work that Elise is looking for. Then we have our superstar co-host, Lindsay. And Lindsay Preston is going to take some of the heavyweight lifting today because she is also a reader for a literary agent. She's also an author. She's also an editor. She's also a ghostwriter, and she does a lot of heavy reading on a professional level. So I thought it would be great to make this session where we can bounce ideas and questions off of two on the other side of the industry so that writers like myself can understand, what do you want from submissions? What are you looking for? Where do you see the trends heading in 2021? And what should we be more aware of as writers? So welcome both Lindsay and Elise. This is exciting for me because I now get to do a little bit of both, but you're going to both do all the heavy weight lifting today. So the very first question I have is, how do your agency models differ based on who you're working for and what you represent?
Oh gosh, well, Lindsay, maybe you should start.
So having just been talking to you about this, I think the biggest difference is that I work for DeForio Literary Agency. He does use readers. Robert DeForio is a longtime kind of staple in the publishing industry. He was CEO of Penguin Books, so he goes back a really long time. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even sure how many agents a junior agency has now, but he does pass that first initial read on to a reader, which I've been told you don't do.
Right. So yeah, and the Dijkstra agency is a boutique agency. We have, and I don't know, Lindsay, in comparison to how many agents you guys have, but yeah, we have about 6 or 7 agents in a wide variety of areas. And we have used readers off and on. I do have one colleague who will sometimes use readers, but we don't have an established reader program and protocol as Lindsay does at her agency. So I do think there's a little bit of a different approach, at least in terms of submissions from the writer's perspective.
So where would that differ if you're both given a submission package? The first question is, and I think I would throw this out to Elise first. When we talk about wanting a submission package from an author, and say there are 5 different authors who give you the same package, a partial, a query letter, and say a synopsis. Is that a standard package you're looking at?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so we generally for fiction, we're going to get query letter, synopsis, first probably 5 to 10 pages. That's what we base our initial decision on. Yes. And then if we're interested, we will ask usually for the first 50 pages. If we're really excited, we'll ask maybe for the full manuscript right from the start.
Okay, and the agents at your agency do the reading on the work that's requested?
Correct, yeah. So at our agency, everything is coming straight to each agent, depending on what their interests are, all that good stuff. Each agent might have slightly different requirements on what they'd like to receive. So it's always important to look up each agent's submission requirements and what they actually do, the kind of projects they handle. But yes, those are going directly to us and we're each looking at them. I should say there is no, I don't want this to come across as a competition. There is no right or wrong way for an agency to do it. But I do think, yeah, it's maybe helpful to think about like who is the first set of eyes looking at your project. And at the Dijkstra agency, it will be one of the actual agents here.
Wow. Okay, that's great. And Lindsay, your perspective as a reader for an agent, which perspective are you receiving the information?
So I don't always get the synopsis in the query letter. That is sorted through by either Bob or one of the other agents. At times he'll send them if he just sends the whole package, but a lot of the times I just get the manuscript, those first pages.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How, if you don't get a synopsis, what is it like to just dive into a manuscript, maybe not knowing anything about it?
I'm one who will pick up a book and read it without knowing what it's about. If someone's like, this book is good, I don't have to read the back of the book. I'll be like, okay, like I'm happy to get in and try to figure it out. Now, what I'm looking for really is the quality of the writing or your character. Do you have some sort of character development in those first few pages? Do you have something in there that is drawing me in to your story in those first few pages where I can almost say like, okay, this story is going to be about this character. Here's some conflict, and I can go from there. And I think it's probably an interesting way of doing it because I'm not going based off of what I think is going to happen or what I believe the story is about or the quality of your query letter. It's really those first pages of like what a reader would do opening your book at the bookstore.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
And how many pages do you give your prospective new submission that comes in, Elise, if you were to read something?
So kind of the opposite from what Lindsay does.
Yeah.
I really am looking at the query letter very seriously and then the synopsis because I want to know exactly what I'm about to dive into because that for me is important because I'm looking to, first of all, just make sure it even feels like a potential good fit for the types of projects that I know I do well, which is important, I think, when you partner yourself with an agent. So I will read that query letter very closely so I really understand what the project is. I'll kind of skim through the synopsis so I can maybe see like what else is going to happen in the book. And then I'll dive into the pages to see if that writing really comes to life and I love it. And then I will read those 5 to 10 pages, but if there's some like deal breaker issue that I'm just like losing steam real fast, I might not get through it all. So I would say you probably have like 3 or 4 pages to to make sure you actually capture at least my attention so that I want to read the rest of the sample and then hopefully request more.
Wow. And Lindsay, how many pages do you give a reader?
About 3 now. And it used to be...
You know, I can feel the sweat rolling down my side of my head here.
It's really sad. It used to be that it was 30 and then like, and I'm a generous reader. I'm a generous editor. I'm a generous reader. And I'm just kind of how I approach things because I know we can make mistakes in a page or 2 and it might not be your tightest. So I am more of a generous reader, but it's now gotten to where those 30 pages where something could pick up, it has to do that same thing in 3 pages, 3 to 5.
3 to 5. So for all you writers out there like myself who think that agents and readers are like gatekeepers who are like guarding the dungeons, these are real people, which I used to believe for a very long time. Like there's some mystical Gothic figures who have a magic wand, and if they open the floodgates and let you in, all your career is made. And I would pound through, originally back in the 2000 year, through that massive chunky book, The Guide to Literary Agents, which came out every year. Sandra Dijkstra Literary Agency, always there. So I knew, yes, this agency is there for sure. And there would always be new agencies coming in, some transitioning out. And, you know, from my perspective as an author, you're always wondering as a writer, what does it mean? Who are these people? Are they legit? Are they real? How much power do they hold? And of course, we don't know the business side as well as you do. What we know is the creative side. So that's why the question was, how many pages do we get? And then the next question is, what do you mean by a strong query letter and a submission package?
I can jump in on this. So a strong query letter, to give you the super bullet point version on what that might look like, a good query letter is a one-page letter which gives the agent the tools to clearly understand what your project is, why it's exciting, and who you are as the author or as a human being. My goal is that in reading that one page, I will understand how to, I will get in the same headspace as you, and I will understand how to interpret the sample pages you have sent. I want that query letter to give me the understanding of that. So yeah, I would say that's kind of the bottom line. So a query letter, to kind of just explain the parts of it super briefly, it kind of opens with the concept and basic information, also so that word count, title, genre. Always put the genre in your query letter. You'd be amazed at how many query letters I read the whole thing and can't figure out if it's even fiction or nonfiction, which really influences how I might read your sample pages. Also in the opening, you know, if you have a endorsement from someone, a blurb, anything like that should go in the beginning. Then the middle part is generally your synopsis or description of the work itself, and then the end will be your bio about you. There are lots of models for good query letters online too. Sorry.
And no, not at all. How many query letters are you currently getting?
Oh gosh, I would say probably most of us at the Dijkstra agency are individually getting probably about 20 submissions a day. Yeah, but the thing, and that fluctuates a lot. I mean, there are some days it'll be higher than that, some days it'll be quiet. But the thing to keep in mind is that reading queries is not, that's not part of an agent's day job normally. We're generally doing that on nights and weekends. This evening I'm doing this instead of reading queries. I mean, that's lovely. I'm excited to do. But I think so it's important to keep in mind that those queries, it's not, I think the big misconception about agents is that we're sitting around like with our cup of coffee in the morning and like our dog in our lap and like reading submissions. And that's really not what we're doing. We're, you know, frantically doing email with our existing clients, that sort of thing. So those queries, those submissions really do pile up. And so you are potentially, you know, coming in like a flood of like other submissions that the agent has to deal with at the end of her week when maybe she's brain fried and tired. So that's kind of the competition that you're potentially dealing with, is that you have to catch that agent's attention when they're, you know, trying to wade through maybe a couple hundred submissions. So that's why, again, number one, your query has to be so concise and easy to understand and absorb. If it's confusing, that can be a deal breaker issue and a reason an agent might pass. And has to give the agent the tools to understand your writing. And then those first like 3 to 5 pages really need to be stellar. That's how you get to the next step.
Wow. Lindsay, what do you have to add to that?
So I don't do as much with the query letters, but I do know that that is how you get passed along to me. So,
Yep.
So you better write a strong one, I guess, if you want to even, if you get to an agency that has readers, to get to the readers, you still have to have your strong query.
Okay. That's really good to know. And I'm sure a lot of writers would not even have known this. And so we talked about previously submission packages. Now say, Elise, you have 5 authors who all give you their individual submission packages based on what we just discussed: query, synopsis, partial. I'm sure somewhere along the line, the packages fall in tiers. Like tier 1 is one which you absolutely feel yes. Then there's a tier 4, a middle, and then possibly a bottom one. What do authors need to take into consideration now that you've explained the query letter? You know, the other components that make it a real stellar submission package.
Sure. So a few things. There are little extras you can do to really help. I mean, let's say it's something that's already, you know, it's an area I actually handle. That's a first step. It's something that might actually be a good fit for me. The next step is to try to make some kind of personal connection. That always helps. If you can demonstrate that you did some research on that agent to actually show that you think you're going to be a good team together and a good fit for whatever reason, that can potentially knock you up to the next tier. And oh gosh, what else? I don't know. And if you have that endorsement, that also can really help. I mean, these are all things that I think about that might help me sell it later on. And then I guess, I don't know, I could think otherwise you're kind of talking about this like middle area, which is where I'm like, oh, do I do it? Do I not? Do I do it? And then sometimes it's just kind of about a gut feeling, like am I genuinely excited about it? An agent may ask you to have a conversation and like to see if you guys actually get along, that sort of thing, if you might be a good team together. All that stuff may be part of the process, and the stuff I will certainly consider, because I am looking for somebody who I'm going to work well with and who's going to be a team player.
Right. This is a question to both of you now. So what about feedback that a writer is lucky to get back from any of you, even if you're not getting signed on, if you're not offered a contract, but feedback on a partial or a full? What does that mean for the writer, and how do we go about it?
You want to take this one, Lindsay?
Sure, because I think our answer might be a little different.
Yeah.
Because Elise and I were actually talking about this during our break, and I, along with my generous reads and generous edits, I give generous feedback. Probably more than most. One, because I hate having to be that person who's like, nope, sorry, you're not getting through. So when I give feedback, it's probably very different, because most times it'd be like, no, thank you very much, you can work on this. I give what would be the start of like a very minor developmental edit, not even close to that, but it's, I mean, just to say like, this is what was missing, here's what I think you need to improve. I don't think most people do that. When it's something I'm sure of, because I was Anju's first reader, I actually sent you the email I wrote.
Yep.
Yeah. And so when it's great, I give my reasons why it's great, because as the reader, you have to tell the agent why you're so sure that he has to rep it, because once you say yes, they still read it.
Right. Because Bob forwarded that email to me and I was in shock. I was like, seriously? And then he forwarded the second one and I was like, really?
Yeah.
So, it really came to me as a surprise that someone could connect with the story after so long. But then, Bob was very confident when he offered the contract, because it was like 15 hours after I sent the manuscript or something, like 2 or 3 days. He handed it over to you. And then Saturday morning, I got it and I was freaking out. And I went to sleep and I made sure when I woke up the next morning that the email was still there. So, to get that email and that feedback, it's a lot for a writer to know that that's where the writing is at, the story is at.
And I kind of have another suggestion, which is a little different even prior to going to your reader or your agent. Because as I just mentioned, that developmental edit, if I were to submit something now, this is not what I did originally. Like my first manuscript that got turned down a ton of times. I went through all of that just like everybody else. I would tell you, if you're very serious about your career, you may give it to your mom to read, your dad, your best friend, someone who loves books, but find a reputable developmental editor, or even just a really good line editor, someone in your genre. Don't go to someone who, because I don't developmental edit. I've got a very small group of genres that I'll do that in. So make sure it's not someone who's just going to say, I'll take it to take it. And have that done and put that time into it instead of just beta readers, because your manuscript is going to be a lot better if you do that.
Right. Elise, what about yourself? What do you say?
And so in terms of feedback, I guess I'll say a few things. So I guess in terms of what someone who's submitted can expect, if I have asked for a full manuscript or even 50 pages, if I've gone beyond that first submission step, then I will absolutely give feedback, and an author can expect that. I will say this though, I mean, always when you're going through the submission journey, you're going to get like a lot of harsh feedback. And yes, you should take it all seriously, but you should also consider it all carefully and make sure it feels right to your project, especially with fiction.
Yep.
Everyone has a different has a different opinion, right?
Yeah.
And just because if an agent, this probably sounds crazy that I'm saying this, I probably should be saying do whatever an agent tells you, but really, like if an agent gives you some feedback that just really does not feel like what your project is supposed to be, you don't have to burn it down to the ground and rewrite it based on what one person has told you. Maybe that person doesn't have the vision for that work. So always take it, with a little bit of a grain of salt. It is good to listen to it and absorb whatever feedback you get, because it's all helpful in the end. But be true to your work as well. I have seen some people who like wildly go back and forth, like completely rewriting their projects and making themselves crazy, and that's not helpful either. But when I have invested a lot of time into a manuscript, yes, I will absolutely give my feedback. I will say that when it's when I've just gotten kind of that, those like 10 pages or something, in those cases, I'm not always going to give super specific feedback on why I passed, just because number one, I can't always, because there's a lot I'm trying to get through. And number two, maybe it just wasn't right for me. Like I'm not the right partner for you. Like I don't share the vision for it. And if that's the case, I don't feel like I'm in the place to tell you what is valid or not valid about your work. So if that's a situation, then I will not like cast judgment on the way you've presented it. However, if there's something obvious that I think you really could benefit from by improving, then sure, I'll mention that. I want to be helpful to writers. Absolutely. Like that's my bottom line, and my whole kind of passion in my work is to do what I can to help writers get their work out there and find their audience. But if an agent does not give you specific feedback, try not to take that too personally. That would be the bottom line.
Grow a thick skin. That's what we're always told right from the beginning. Grow a thick skin and, separate yourself and distance yourself emotionally from your project. Yeah. So I guess those are some of the, key lessons I've learned. And what do feedbacks like, and this is something both of you can answer, R&R, revise and resubmit, how do we interpret that? How do we interpret no response? How do we interpret follow-up if you haven't heard back in 6 months? Or do we wait for 6 years? Or do we wait for 6 weeks? What's the right way to go about it?
So in terms of response time, every agent will somewhere list what their expected response time is. So use that as a guideline. When you are submitting to agents, make yourself a big, beautiful Excel spreadsheet that has all this information on each agent you're going to, so you really know what the expectations are. That said, we're in a time, especially right now, where a lot of people get backed up. And even if they say they're going to respond in 6 weeks, maybe it's been 6 months and they haven't. So, I would say, number one, don't hold yourself up too much. Don't hold your project with just one agent for 8 months while you're waiting for them anxiously to get back. Keep moving forward. You do have to try a lot of people to find your agent these days, I think. So you just have to be willing to like keep moving on. That said, you may end up hearing back from the person later on, and that's great. But I would just try to keep moving forward. I do think it's okay if an agent says that they do respond. I do think it's okay when it's been a certain period of time to ping them, but I probably wouldn't just like keep pinging them relentlessly, because that's not really going to help. They'll get back to you when they get back to you. Then some agents just don't respond. And they hopefully, if that's their policy, they will say that in their submission requirements. As far as revise and resubmit, I have found that that's a practice that like certain agents use a lot. Sometimes in particular categories, like a lot of my like YA agent friends, like that's like a standard part of the process and is totally a fine thing to do. I am not an agent who does revise and resubmits. It's just not part of my process. So I think if an agent asks that, then speak to that agent about just what that means for them and what the process going forward might look like if you invest that time.
Lindsay?
I don't get to that point. So I can tell you that I can sometimes get a manuscript on a day that I don't have much, and I can read it in 2 days. And then with homeschooling and a whole new level of dynamics, it could take 2 weeks till I can even sit down with it.
Wow. So things have changed.
Yeah, it's really about like the balance of if you have them stacking up as Elise said, she has other work. Her main job is not to read the submissions. She got a lot of other stuff to do. So I think most of the readers have other jobs as well.
So with the change now, Lindsay, in the global, national situation with 2020 and 2021, and Elise also, where do you see the publishing industry heading? Where do you see the role of books and media? And also, what does that mean for writers?
Let's see, would you like to start?
I can start. So I think the thing I'm seeing is the definite increase in self-publishing.
Okay.
It was very taboo and very vanity press 10 years ago. And I think now it's become a really viable quality option to get started if you want. And I think that's where the big change is. I also think there's that change from like the mass paperback kind of going off to the wayside, where a lot of first-time authors were getting published, which may have also been the increase in self-publishing. So we lost a big part of the industry where a lot of these first-time authors were getting published. And I think that was a big change. But on a brighter note, reading is up. It's on a drastic incline. So that's really great.
Elise, what do you have to say for 2021? Well, just in terms of the pandemic and what we've seen there, just briefly, when all this started, everyone was freaking out, and of course, and we're still freaking out. But at first, everybody was like, what's going to happen to publishing? Oh my gosh. And the wonderful news is that it really has remained, compared to some industries, incredibly stable. People, we've had our challenges, of course, but publishers still need to put books out into the world. That's how they make money and support themselves, right? So they need to keep buying from agents. So we've still had a job, which is great. And people are still reading. The first few months of the pandemic, what we found is that people were really going back to the tried and true books. And it was really, really tough for the brand new authors. They were going back and reading, the Hunger Games, which they never read before, and all these just classic, kind of already bestseller authors, which was great for those authors. But like I said, kind of sucked for the people who were trying to break out into the market right when all that started. Even now as well, I think what's going to happen in 2021 is that we have this crazy situation of all these books that got postponed that are now being smushed into 2021. And so now we're seeing a lot of books that were slated for 2021 pub actually maybe being postponed a little bit. So we're doing this kind of whole shuffling right now of pub dates. How long that's going to go on is still to be decided. I think a lot of it depends on how long this really lasts.
What was that? And with that, I'm sorry to say we have to wrap it up. I did not want to wrap the session up because here is my whole list of questions here. But all good things have to come to an end. And I promise you all, we will bring Elise Capron back in 2021 to talk about what's happening in 2021.
Maybe I'll know more then.
But I really, really appreciate you having spent the time with us, having educated us, and honored National Novel Writing Month with your expertise and guidance. And same with you, Lindsay. This could not have happened without you. And it's a privilege to have both of you on a mantra that I've been living with for 20 years. Thank you.
This was super, super fun. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.